they've created mass global dependence on the state.
The thing is that what we're seeing today is much more extreme than what we saw back then.
It's a defining moment. This is bigger than what happened in 2008. We are in a new world. The world will be very different. There'll be a new world order. The greatest force through time is human inventiveness, adaptability. We're going to restructure our economy. American printing of money and the borrowing will leave us with a lot of debt and monetization. Who will pay these bills?
Do you think that we're headed into a global depression?
The word is an evocative word.
Sure.
It can be scary and so on. So what do you mean by a depression? I think you could look at this like a tsunami that's hit, the virus itself and the social distancing. And then what are the consequences in terms of the wreckage when you look at it? And I think you have to think of that as incomes and balance sheets. So it was a tremendous income hit. And then the balance sheets are losses. And who has what savings and so on. And then how is that dealt with? And in order to understand that, you have to realize that there are these holes in income and the holes in the balance sheets. And then you have to realize that there is the production of money and credit. And who produces that money and credit? Okay, the money and credit comes in different flavors. There is US dollar money and credit. There is euro dollar money and credit. And so when you look at the world and you're seeing a situation that is the same as existed really in the 1930 to 45 period, in that now we're seeing the production of a lot of debt, a lot of borrowing by the government. We're seeing zero interest rates and not the traditional kind of monetary policy, but the producing of a lot of money and credit. So the Federal Reserve is buying the Treasury's debt, and the Treasury is getting that money to mostly Americans in some imperfect but remarkably large way. American printing of money and the borrowing will leave us with a lot of debt and monetization. That's something interesting to talk about, and we need to talk about that. Who will pay these bills? And how will that be shared will be something we need to talk about. But you will know that you will get that money, and that the Europeans will get their versions of that money. But we are in a new world, and that world is most similar to the 1930 to 45 world, and a lot of the world will not get that money in credit. There are four things that are the driving forces of our economy and our lifestyle and wealth. And the first and most powerful is productivity, which comes from people learning and inventing and doing things well, and it grows slowly. 1 or 2 or 3% a year, it grows slowly, and it's not volatile because knowledge isn't volatile, but it grows. Then there's a short-term debt cycle. The short-term debt cycle is, recessions and expansions and booms and recessions, that they last about 8-10 years. And then there's a long-term debt cycle. And that long-term debt cycle, which goes on about once every 50 to 75 years, is when you begin a new type of money and a new type of credit. That began in 1945. The New World Order, at the end of World War II, and with the Bretton Woods monetary system, created a new monetary system in 1945, a new money. So they wiped out pretty much the old money, or they largely disposed of it, and they began anew, and that's the New World Order, which was the American World Order, and we have seen it, and still 70% of the money and credit that exists in the economy is running by dollars. And what you have traditionally is the breakdown. And then the fourth influence is politics. And politics is largely how we deal with each other. And there's internal politics and there's external politics. The internal politics is how do you deal with the wealth gap? How do you deal with the values gap? Do you have a common mission? Do we have an American dream that we can agree on and that we're pursuing that together? Or do you fight over wealth and so on? And so when you look at history, that's what revolutions are in their various ways. And there's always a revolution in one of these. Sometimes those are peaceful revolutions, and so sometimes they're disruptive. There's also external politics. So that politics means between countries. And you have a situation when there's a rising power challenging existing power. There is competition and there is a risk of war. And so how they deal with each other, so that whether there's a greater good or whether they are fighting with each other, is the defining moment. There are always stress tests, these big stress tests that come along once every 75 years. And when they happen, and this is a stress test. And I think that what we're going to see is as how we deal with each other. There's enough wealth to go around, but what do you do when you're outside the ring of support? Let's say of the US dollar. And what is that going to be like for those entities? Or if you're within the ring of support, how will that bill be divided? And how will we be with each other? I think we're going to have to reconsider who has what is it about education and so on. So that's what we're